I had never contemplated sharing such an intimate moment with my dog before, but on that solitary Christmas Eve, as the snow gently fell outside, I found myself longing for comfort. I simply wished to rest for a while, to escape the burden of solitude and allow the serene stillness of the holiday to envelop me. As a woman in my late 30s, I have come to know and accept my full-figured body, with measurements of 38 inches around the chest, 32 inches at the waist, and 42 inches around the hips. I am a housewife, a mother of two, and a devoted wife who loves her husband deeply. My husband and I led a modest life. We may not have had much, but we had each other, and that was sufficient. However, life has a way of testing the foundations of even the strongest relationships. Family issues, which we had never foreseen, compelled us to make the difficult choice to relocate. We found ourselves in a small, cramped apartment, and financially, we were in a precarious situation. After a few weeks, we realized we had no option but to share a room. While it was not ideal, we believed it to be temporary. The space was too confined, the tension too palpable, there was no privacy and no respite from the incessant noise of life. The move was fraught with stress, and the burden of financial difficulties, combined with the strain of being in such close quarters, began to take a toll on our marriage. I sensed a shift in the atmosphere between us, a distance was growing, even as we shared the same bed. Having been married for over a decade, I had never envisioned that anything could come between us. Yet, in that tiny room, with our privacy stripped away, the pressures of life began to alter our relationship in ways I could not comprehend. I felt adrift, both physically and emotionally. The apartment was filled with people, my children, my husband, and our dog, Ronnie. Ronnie, who had been a loyal and affectionate companion for years, had always provided comfort in our lives, serving as a reminder of simpler times. I had never considered that his presence might complicate matters, that the emotional strain of cohabitation would weigh heavily on us. In such close quarters, circumstances could lead to unforeseen developments. Initially, I appreciated Ronnie's presence, he made life more manageable. He would engage with the children while my husband worked late, and his cheerful demeanor provided a much-needed distraction from the stress we were experiencing. I perceived him merely as a good dog, a loyal companion, never considering that my emotional vulnerability might be connected to him. However, when one is compelled to be in close proximity to another person consistently, emotions can become entangled, and the distinction between right and wrong may become obscured. One evening, everything shifted. The house was unusually quiet, my husband, fatigued from work, had fallen asleep in another room, and the children had gone to bed early. It was just Ronnie and me. He sat beside me on the couch, his large, warm eyes gazing up at me as if he comprehended the inner turmoil I was experiencing. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of comfort in his presence. My husband and I had been emotionally distant for an extended period, and I had not realized how much I longed for the warmth of someone who was simply there for me, unburdened by the weight of the world. Ronnie remained by my side, a soothing presence that reminded me I was not entirely alone in my solitude. We settled near the fireplace, where the flickering flames created a cozy atmosphere, casting playful shadows that danced across the walls. As I stroked his soft fur, a wave of gratitude enveloped me for the simple solace he provided during this vulnerable moment. Tears began to well in my eyes, the weight of my emotions becoming nearly unbearable. Sensing my distress, Ronnie gently licked my hand, as if to reassure me that everything would be all right. As I continued to sit there, Ronnie's affectionate nature became increasingly evident. He nudged my arm insistently and leaned his head against my shoulder, his warm breath creating a gentle tickle along my neck. I chuckled softly, whispering sweet words to him, "You're such a good boy." Ronnie's demeanor, however, soon changed unexpectedly as he pressed against me, playfully licking my cheek with enthusiasm. Initially, I perceived his actions as a quest for comfort, a fellow spirit responding to my loneliness. I welcomed his embrace, allowing his paw to rest on my shoulders and even placing a kiss on the top of his head, feeling a complex mix of affection and vulnerability. Yet, Ronnie's energy shifted, becoming more fervent and almost demanding. In that moment, I found myself swept away, risking everything I held dear, including my marriage. After our intimate exchange, he sought my closeness again, inching toward me with an eagerness that was difficult to resist. I gently pushed him back, murmuring, "No, Ronnie, that's enough." His large brown eyes met mine, reflecting a flicker of hurt that pierced my heart. Guilt washed over me, yet I recognized the necessity of establishing boundaries. Ronnie retreated to the far side of the room, lying down with his head resting on his paws, his gaze fixed on me, filled with a mix of confusion and sadness. It felt as though I had shattered an unspoken connection between us, leaving a heavy knot of regret in my chest. I could not comprehend what had transpired. It was a moment of weakness, a vulnerability I should never have allowed. I do not recall exactly how it began, but before I realized it, I had crossed a line I never thought I would. It was wrong, so wrong, but in that fleeting moment, it felt like a release from the pressure that had been building within me for so long. Guilt and shame washed over me in waves, yet I did not stop. It was quick, over before I could fully process what had occurred, but the damage was irrevocable. In that brief instant, I had betrayed everything: my husband, my children, and myself. The weight of it struck me like a ton of bricks. I pulled away, my heart racing, my mind screaming for me to stop, but it was too late. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. The ensuing silence was suffocating, leaving me uncertain of how to look at Ronnie or how to act. He too appeared transformed, though his behavior remained unchanged. We both feigned ignorance of the incident, yet I found it increasingly difficult to ignore the weight of my actions. Each passing moment felt like an eternity. Whenever I gazed at my husband, I was confronted with his trust and love, and I was acutely aware that I had shattered it. I had betrayed him in the most profound manner. That night, sleep eluded me as I lay in bed, fixated on the ceiling, my thoughts consumed by the enormity of my wrongdoing. My mind was a whirlwind of questions. How could I have committed such an act? Why did I allow it to transpire? The burden of guilt was unbearable. Meanwhile, my husband slept peacefully in the adjacent room, oblivious to the darkness that had infiltrated our lives. I could not summon the courage to awaken him and reveal the truth. How could I possibly destroy everything we had built with a single admission? The subsequent days passed in a haze. I went through the motions of daily responsibilities, caring for the children, managing the household, yet my heart was heavy with remorse. Each time I encountered my husband, I found it impossible to meet his gaze. He seemed to sense my distress, but chose not to address it. I had always taken pride in being a devoted wife and mother, but now I felt like an outsider in my own home. I was unable to confide in anyone. Who could I trust with this burden? How could I articulate what had transpired without jeopardizing everything? Shame enveloped me, leaving me feeling as though I were suffocating in my own skin. The guilt gnawed at me relentlessly, and I felt trapped. Then there were the moments with Ronnie. Each time he entered the room, a wave of panic surged within me. What had we done? What was I supposed to say to him? How could I ever look at him the same way again? He had always been a steadfast companion, but now our relationship felt irrevocably altered. The atmosphere between us was charged with unspoken words and palpable tension. We both understood the gravity of what had occurred, yet neither of us could act as if it had not happened. It loomed over us like a dark cloud, refusing to dissipate. As the days progressed, I came to the realization that I could not continue living in this manner. The weight of my guilt was suffocating, and I knew that eventually, something would have to give. I would have to confront the repercussions of my actions, yet I found myself unable to do so. The reality of my deeds was too overwhelming to accept. The mere thought of witnessing the pain in my husband's eyes and observing our family disintegrate due to my error was unbearable. I attempted to suppress my feelings, to disregard the situation, to act as if it had never occurred, but the truth persistently lingered in the shadows. Each time I gazed at my children or caught sight of my husband, the guilt served as a relentless reminder of my transgressions. One evening, following a particularly heated dispute with my husband, I stood before the mirror, confronting the woman I had become. I had betrayed the man I cherished. I had betrayed my family. How could I ever face them again? How could I possibly forgive myself?